The silent heart of Amarillo. The arrival, the dusty streets of Amarillo, stretched endlessly under the scorching Texas sun as the stagecoach rumbled to a halt outside Murphy's General Store. Clara Whitmore pressed her gloved hand against the small window, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. After 3 weeks of bone-jarring travel from Boston, she had finally arrived at her destination, a town that would either become her salvation or her doom. As the driver held Pierre down from the coach, Clara's emerald eyes swept across the frontier settlement. Wooden buildings lined the main street, their paint peeling under the relentless sun. Cowboys lounged outside the saloon, their spurs jingling softly as they shifted their weight. The air was thick with dust and the scent of horses, so different from the refined atmosphere of her former life. "You must be Miss Whitmore," came a gruff voice behind her. Clara turned to face a portly man with kind eyes and a weathered face. "Mr. Murphy, I presume?" "That's right, ma'am. Welcome to Amarillo. I've got your trunk loaded up in my wagon. Sheriff Dalton's expecting you at his place." Murphy's expression grew troubled. "Though I should warn you, miss, he's been hitting the bottle pretty hard lately." Clara's stomach tightened. She had known this arrangement carried risks when she'd answered the advertisement for a mail-order bride. But desperation had left her few choices. Her father's gambling debts had consumed their family fortune, and the alternative to this marriage was destitution. The ride to Sheriff Dalton's house was mercifully short. The modest wooden structure sat at the edge of town, surrounded by a small garden that had clearly seen better days. Weeds choked to the flower beds, and the porch sagged slightly under the weight of neglect. "Jack, your bride's here," Murphy called out as he helped Clara from the wagon. The front door swung open with a bang, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered man with disheveled dark hair and bloodshot eyes. Sheriff Jack Dalton swayed slightly as he stepped onto the porch, a half-empty whiskey bottle dangling from his fingers. Well, his leer wears thick with alcohol. "Ain't you a pretty little thing? Come to tame the wild sheriff, have you?" Clara lifted a chin, drawing upon every ounce of dignity her Boston upbringing had instilled in her. "Sheriff Dalton, I'm Clara Whitmore. I believe we have an arrangement." Jack's laugh was bitter and harsh. "An arrangement, that's one way to put it." He took a long swig from the bottle. "Come on in then, wife. Let me show you what you've gotten yourself into." The interior of the house was as neglected as the exterior. Empty bottles littered the floor, and the air reeked of stale alcohol and unwashed clothes. Clara's heart sank as she surveyed what was to be her new home. "Charming, ain't it?" Jack gestured broadly, nearly losing his balance. "This is what's left of the great Jack Dalton, who returned town drunk. Perhaps we could discuss our arrangement when you're more yourself," Clara said carefully. Jack's eyes flashed with anger. "This is myself, lady. This is all that's left." He stumbled toward her, and Clara instinctively stepped back. "You're having second thoughts already. Can't say I blame you." Before Clara could respond, a gentle knock came at the door. Job cursed under his breath, and yanked it open to reveal a young man with sandy hair and kind brown eyes. What struck Clara immediately was the way he moved his hands in fluid, graceful gestures as he communicated. "What do you want, Thomas?" Jacques snapped, though his tone lacked real venom. The young man, Thomas, continued his hand movements, his expression earnest and concerned. Clara watched, fascinated, as Jack's face softened slightly. Yeah, I know she's here," Jack muttered. "Thomas Reed, meet my mail-order bride. Clara Whitmore. Clara, this is Thomas. He's deaf, but he's got more sense than the rest of this town put together." Thomas turned to Clara and offered a warm smile, touching his hat respectfully. His hands moved again, and Clara found herself wishing she could understand what he was saying. "He says welcome to Amarillo, and he hopes you'll be happy here," Jack translated, his voice slightly less harsh. Thank you, Clara said, addressing Thomas directly. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thomas's smile widened, and he signed something else to Jack, who scowled in response. He's offering to help you get settled, Jack said grudgingly. Thinks you might need some assistance dealing with a local drunk. Clara felt a flush of gratitude toward this stranger, who showed more courtesy in 5 minutes than her intended husband had managed since her arrival. That's very kind of you, Mr. Reed. As the afternoon wore on, Thomas proved invaluably in helping Clara organize the chaos of Jack's home. While the sheriff retreated to his bottle, Thomas swept floors, organized belongings, and even managed to communicate the basic household information through a combination of gestures and written notes. Clara found herself drawn to his quiet strength and gentle manner. Unlike Jack's volatile presence, Thomas radiated a calm confidence that put her at ease. When he smiled, which he did often, his entire face lit up with genuine warmth. As evening approached, Jack emerged from his stupor long enough to mumble something about sleeping arrangements. You can have the bedroom, he slurred. I'll take the couch. Don't expect any marital duties until I'm good and ready. Clara's cheeks burned with embarrassment, but Thomas's presence somehow made the humiliation better. He caught her eye and signed something that, even without understanding the words, conveyed sympathy and support. That night, as Clara lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to Jack's drunken snores from the next room, she wondered what she had gotten herself into. But mixed with her fear and uncertainty was something unexpected: curiosity about the deaf man who had shown her such kindness. Are you enjoying Clara's journey in Amarillo? This tale of unexpected love and second chances continues to unfold in this historic Texas town. Stay tuned to discover how her story developed. Jack would stumble out of the house each morning, badge pinned crookedly to his wrinkled shirt, to perform his duties as sheriff with varying degrees of competence. He'd return each evening progressively more intoxicated, often requiring Thomas's assistance to make it home safely. Thomas, Clara discovered, worked as the town's carpenter and handyman. His skill with wood was remarkable, and despite his inability to hear, he seemed to understand the needs of Amarillo's residents better than anyone. He had a workshop behind the blacksmith's forge, where he crafted everything from furniture to wagon repairs. Clara began visiting his workshop regularly, initially under the pretense of commissioning repairs for Jack's neglected house. But she found herself lingering, fascinated by the way Thomas worked with such precision and care. His hands, which spoke so eloquently in scene language, were equally expressive as they shaped wood into beautiful functional pieces. You don't have to keep coming by, Thomas wrote on a piece of paper one afternoon, his brown eyes twinkling with amusement. Though I enjoy the company, Clara felt her cheeks warm. I find your work fascinating. In Boston, we simply bought furniture from shops. He never considered how it was made. Thomas smiled and picked up his pencil again. Would you like to learn? I could teach you some basic techniques. And so began Clara's education in woodworking. Thomas proved to be a patient teacher, guiding her hands as she learned to feel the grain of the wood, to understand how each piece wanted to be shaped. His touch was gentle but sure, and Clara found herself looking forward to these lessons with an anticipation that had nothing to do with carpentry. Meanwhile, her relationship with Jack continued to deteriorate. His drinking had worsened since her arrival, as if her presence reminded him of responsibilities he wasn't ready to face. He was never violent, but his words could cut deep, especially when he'd had too much whiskey. You're wasting your time with that deaf fool, he slurred one evening, having witnessed Clara returning from Thomas's workshop. What's he gonna do, sing sweet nothings at you? Thomas is a good man, Clara replied firmly. He's been nothing but kind to me. Jack's laugh was bitter. Kind, right. You know what I think? I think you're sweet on him. My own wife? Penning after the town mute. We're not truly married, Jack, Clara said quietly. We've never even had a proper ceremony. Details. Jack waved dismissively. You're here, ain't you? That makes you mine. But Clara was beginning to question whether she truly belonged to anyone, or whether she wanted to. The turning point came on a sweltering Thursday afternoon. Clara was in Thomas's workshop, carefully sanding a small jewelry box they'd been working on together, when shouting erupted from the main street. Through the window, she could see a crowd gathering outside the saloon. Thomas felt the vibrations of the commotion and looked up from his workbench. Together, they hurried outside to see what was happening. In the middle of the street, Jack stood swaying, dangerously, his gun drawn and pointed at the young cowboy, who couldn't have been more than 18. The boy's hands were raised, his face pale with terror. "He told you to stay away from my wife," Jack shouted, his words slurring together. "Saw you talking to her outside Murphy's store." Clara's heart stopped. The boy had indeed spoken to her earlier, a polite greeting and a compliment about her dress. Nothing more. "Sheriff, please," the young man stammered. "I didn't mean nothing by it. Just being friendly." "Jack, put the gun down," called out Doc Henderson, the town physician. The boy didn't do anything wrong, but Jack was beyond reason, lost in a haze of alcohol and jealousy. His finger tightened on the trigger, and Clara knew she had to act. "Jack, stop," she cried, stepping into the street. "He's telling the truth. We barely spoke. Stay back, Clara." Jack swung the gun toward her, his eyes wild. "This is between me and him." The crowd gasped, and Clara froze as she found herself staring down the barrel of her husband's weapon. In that moment, she realized just how far Jack had fallen and how dangerous he had become. Suddenly, Thomas was there, moving with surprising speed for such a large man. He stepped between Clara and the gun, his hands moving rapidly in sign language. Though Jack couldn't understand the words, the meaning was clear. Thomas was challenging him. "Get out of the way, Thomas," Jack snarled. "This ain't your fight." But Thomas stood his ground, his brown eyes steady and unafraid. He signed again, more slowly this time, and Clara could see the determination in every gesture. "He says, if you want to hurt her, you'll have to go through him first," came a voice from the crowd. Mrs. Patterson, the school teacher, had learned some sign language to communicate with a deaf student years earlier. Jack's face contorted with rage. "You think you're some kind of hero? You can't even hear me telling you to move." Thomas remained motionless, a wall of calm strength, protecting Clara from her husband's madness. The standoff stretched on, the only sounds the whisper of wind through the street and Jack's labored breathing. Finally, Doc Henderson and two other men managed to approach Jack from behind and disarm him. The sheriff collapsed to his knees in the dust, the fight going out of him as quickly as it had come. "Get him to the jail," Doc Henderson ordered. "Let him sleep it off." As the crowd dispersed and Jack was led away, Clara found herself alone with Thomas in the middle of the street. Her hands were shaking, and she felt tears threatening to spill over. Thomas gently took her arm and guided her back to his workshop. Once inside, he poured a cup of water from a pitcher and sat beside her on a wooden bench he'd crafted. "Thank you," Clara whispered, her voice barely audibly. "You could have been killed." Thomas picked up his pencil and wrote carefully, "I couldn't let him hurt you. You mean too much to me." Clara's breath caught as she read the words. She looked up to find Thomas watching her with an expression of such tenderness that it took her breath away. "Thomas, she began, but words failed her. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and gently touched her cheek. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. In that moment, Clara understood that what she felt for this gentle, strong man went far beyond gratitude. Despite the circumstances that had brought her to Amarillo, despite the complications of her arrangement with Jack, she was falling in love with Thomas Reed. And from the look in his eyes, he was falling in love with her too. The days following the street confrontation brought an uneasy quiet to Amarillo. Jack had been confined to the jail for 3 days, to sober up, during which time the town council held heated discussions about his fitness to continue as sheriff. Clara found herself at the center of unwanted attention, with townspeople whispering behind her back about the dramatic scene. Thomas, meanwhile, had become something of a local hero. Word spread quickly about how he'd stood up to the drunken sheriff to protect Clara, and several residents made a point of commissioning work from him as a show of support. When Jack was finally released, he returned home a changed man, at least temporarily. The shock of nearly shooting an innocent boy and his own wife had sobered him in ways that went beyond alcohol. He sat Clara down at their kitchen table, his hands shaking slightly as he poured coffee. "Clara, what I did was unforgivable," he began, his voice horsey. "He could have killed you. I could have killed that boy." Clara studied her husband's face, seeing genuine remorse there for the first time since her arrival. "Jack, you need help. This drinking is destroying you. I know." He ran his hands through his hair. "I've been trying to drown out the war, the things I saw, the things I did. But all I've done is make everything worse." For a moment, Clara felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps there was still something worth saving in their arrangement. "We could try to make this work, Jack."
"But you have to stop drinking."
"Completely." Jack nodded eagerly. "I will. I promise you, Clara. I'll be the husband you deserve." But even as he spoke the words, Clara's heart remained heavy, because she knew now that her feelings had shifted irrevocably toward Thomas. The gentle carpenter had awakened something in her that she'd never experienced, a love that was both passionate and peaceful, exciting and comforting. The next few weeks tested everyone's Jack made a genuine effort to stay sober, throwing himself into his duties as sheriff with renewed vigor. He was courteous to Clara, even tender at times, and she could see glimpses of the man he might have been before the war broke him. But Clara found herself torn between duty and desire. She had made a commitment to Jack, had come to Amarillo specifically to be his wife. Yet every stolen moment with Thomas made her question whether honoring that commitment was worth sacrificing her chance at true happiness. Thomas, for his part, maintained a respectful distance while Jack was making his efforts. But Clara could see the longing in his eyes whenever their paths crossed, could feel the electric tension whenever their hands accidentally brushed. The situation came to a head on a warm evening in late summer. Clara was tending to her small garden, one of the few improvements she'd managed to make to Jack's property, when Thomas appeared at the gate. He looked troubled, and Clara immediately set down her watering can. "What's wrong?" she asked, moving toward him. Thomas pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to her. Clara's heart sank as she read the carefully written words. "Clara, I've been offered a job in San Antonio. Good pay, steady work. I think I should take it. Seeing you every day, knowing you belong to another man, is tearing me apart. I love you too much to stay and watch you try to build a life with Jack. I'll be leaving on the morning stage. I wanted to say goodbye, Thomas." Clara's hands trembled as she finished reading. "Thomas, no, you can't leave." He took the paper back and wrote quickly, "What choice do I have? You're married to Jack." "But I'm not," Clara burst out, her voice louder than she'd intended. "We never had a ceremony. We're not truly married in any way that matters." Thomas's eyes widened, and he wrote again, "Then why do you stay?" It was the question Clara had been avoiding, the one that cut to the heart of her dilemma. "Because I made a promise. Because he's trying to change. Because I don't know what else to do." Thomas set down his pencil and took her hands in his. His touch was warm and strong, and Clara felt tears beginning to flow. "I love you," she whispered. "I know it's wrong. I know it's complicated. But I love you, Thomas." His face lit up with joy and pain in equal measure. He pulled her closer, and for a moment, Clara thought he might kiss her. But then they heard footsteps on the path, and they sprang apart, just as Jack rounded the corner of the house. "Evening, Thomas," Jack said, his voice carefully neutral. "Clara, Jack." Clara's voice came out as barely a whisper. He was just saying goodbye. He's leaving for San Antonio tomorrow. Jack's eyes moved between them, and Clara could see him taking in their flushed faces, their obvious distress. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Finally, Jack sighed deeply. "Thomas, could I have a word with you, man to man?" Thomas nodded, though he looked weary. Clara started to protest, but Jack held up a hand. "Please, Clara, just give us a few minutes." Reluctantly, Clara retreated to the house, though she positioned herself near the window where she could see the two men talking in the garden. Jack spoke while Thomas listened, occasionally writing responses on his ever-present paper. The conversation lasted nearly an hour, and Clara watched with growing anxiety as both men's expressions shifted from tension to something that looked almost like understanding. Finally, they shook hands, and Thomas headed back toward town, while Jack came inside. "What did you tell him?" Clara asked immediately. Jack poured himself a cup of coffee. "Coffee, not whiskey," Clara noted, and sat down heavily at the table. "I told him the truth, which is that I'm not the man you need, Clara, that I may never be." Jack's voice was quiet, but steady. He also told him that "I've seen the way you look at each other, and that I'm not fool enough to think I can compete with real love." Clara's heart began to race. "Jack, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that I release you from our arrangement. You came here to marry Jack Dalton, but the man you agreed to marry died somewhere in the war. What's left isn't worthy of a woman like you." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. "Jack, you're a good man. You're just hurting. Maybe, but hurt or not, I can't give you what Thomas can. He can't love you the way you deserve to be loved." Jack reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm going to tell the town that our arrangement didn't work out, that we've decided to part ways amicably. You'll be free to marry whoever you choose." "And Thomas, what did you tell him?" Jack smiled, and for the first time since Clara had known him, it reached his eyes. "I told him that if he lets you get away, he's a bigger fool than I am. Will Clara find her happily ever after with Thomas?" Don't miss the stunning conclusion of this tale of love and redemption in the heart of Texas. Subscribe to follow their journey to its romantic finale. The morning sun cast long shadows across Amarillo's main street. As Clara stood outside the stagecoach depot, her heart pounding with nervous anticipation. In her hands, she clutched a small wooden box, the jewelry box she and Thomas had crafted together during those precious afternoons in his workshop. Thomas was seated inside the coach, his travel bag stowed beneath his feet. Through the window, Clara could see his profile, strong and resolute, as he stared straight ahead. He hadn't seen her yet, and for a moment she hesitated. Was she doing the right thing? Was she being fair to Jack, to Thomas, to herself? The memory of Jack's words from the night before gave her courage. "Go to him, Clara. Don't let pride or propriety rob you of happiness. I've made enough mistakes for all of us." Taking a deep breath, Clara approached the coach. The driver was making final preparations for departure, checking harnesses and securing luggage. She had only moments before Thomas would be gone from her life forever. "Thomas," she called softly. His head turned sharply toward the sound of her voice, his brown eyes widening with surprise and something that looked like hope. He moved to the window, his hands already forming questions in sign language. "Please," Clara said, stepping closer to the coach. "Don't go, not like this." Thomas glanced around at the small crowd of passengers and onlookers, then climbed down from the coach to face her. He pulled out his pencil and paper, writing quickly. "Clara, what are you here? Where's Jack?" "Jack released me from our arrangement," Clara said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "He said I was free to choose my own path. And I choose you, Thomas. If you'll have me." Thomas's face went through a series of emotions: disbelief, joy, concern. He wrote again, "Are you certain? This will cause talk. People will say things about you leaving your husband for the deaf carpenter." Clara smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. "Let them talk. I've spent my whole life doing what was expected of me, what was proper. For once I want to do what makes me happy. And you make me happy, Thomas. You make me feel alive. The stagecoach's driver cleared his throat impatiently. Folks, I need to know if this gentleman is traveling or not. We've got a schedule to keep. Thomas looked at Clara, then at the coach, then back at Clara. Slowly, he reached into the coach and retrieved his travel bag. I'm staying, he said aloud, his voice slightly unclear but perfectly understandable. Clara gasped. She had never heard Thomas speak before, hadn't even known he could. Thomas, you can talk, he nodded, setting down his bag and pulling out his paper one more time. I lost my hearing in an accident when I was 12, but I remember how to speak. I just don't like to. People stare, make fun of how I sound. But for you, I'll try anything. Tears streamed down Clara's face as she stepped into his arms. You don't have to change anything about yourself for me. I love you exactly as you are. Thomas held her close. Clara could feel his heart beating rapidly against her chest. Around them the small crowd began to murmur and whisper, but Clara found she didn't care. For the first time since arriving in Amarillo, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Well, I'll be damned, came a familiar voice. Clara looked up to see Jack approaching, a genuine smile on his face. Looks like I timed this right. Jack, Clara said, pulling back from Thomas's embrace but keeping hold of his hand. I thought you were at the sheriff's office. I was, had some business to take care of. Jack's smile widened. Turns out the town council's been looking for a reason to replace me as sheriff. My little performance the other day gave them all the excuse they needed. As of